driving has the lane correct thing,
Yeah.
which I don't really like.
Yeah.
I mean, so the bolt, you can turn it on and off. I'm cool with it.
Good morning. This is the Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session. It is Thursday, November 3rd, 2022. It is 10:34 a.m. We're starting a little bit late this morning, but instead of our end time that was set for 11:30, we will be ending at noon. This is a hybrid meeting. We're in Building 1, room 280. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia, I'm the chair of the board. To my right is Vice Chair Ty Menser, to my left is Commissioner Gary Edwards. Also in the boardroom is County Manager Ramiro Chavez, as well as Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell, and Director of Community and Planning and Economic Development, Joshua Cummings, as well as other staff members joining us for our topic, which is a post-hearing briefing, Development Code Docket A-8 Habitat Conservation Plan, Implementing Ordinance Follow-Up. So,
Go ahead, Josh.
Okay,
That
sounds good. I am Joshua Cummings, the Director of CPED, Community Planning and Economic Development. Here with us, we have Chris Chapeau, who is the Planning Manager for Community Planning, and Brett Burris, who is the Development Services Manager at CPED as well. Thank you, Commissioners. The public hearing that we had a couple weeks ago was to hear testimony on the implementing codes and ordinances for the Habitat Conservation Program. The Habitat Conservation Plan, HCP, has been accepted by the federal government, and we've been provided an ITP, so we're shifting HCP to Habitat Conservation Program. And so as part of that, you've heard me say on a number of occasions that the problem that we've been faced with is one that was brought to us by the federal government in the Endangered Species Act, the ESA. And I think the county manager has put it well in the past that the federal legislation rules put a box around Thurston County in developing in the certain service areas that are impacted by the habitat that the species are listed within the ESA. And that we've worked hard to find a way out of that box for our applicants, residents, citizens of Thurston County that live within those service areas or want to develop in those service areas. And the first step was to have a habitat conservation plan that was approved by the federal government. That occurred in July of 2022, and the outcome of that was the receipt of an incidental take permit. That ITP says that the federal government trusts Thurston County to abide by the rules within that plan to then provide permits to the applicants within the service areas. So that's a big deal. That's been 5 or 10 years coming, depending upon where your perspective lies. In 2018, the Board of County Commissioners at that time provided clear direction to CPED to engage with the federal government to receive that ITP. So that's the 5-year clock that I'm referring to. Big deal. Step number 1, receiving the ITP. The next step is the land acquisition. As part of that plan, Thurston County is working to acquire the development rights and/or property to use for mitigation land for the endangered species to allow for applicants to do what's called the take. That's the incidental take permit. You're taking the habitat from those areas. And so as we work to acquire those lands, we need to have that purchase of all the service areas over the 30-year permit of the HCP, which we have. Sorry, that was a little disjointed. Anyways, step 1, the permit has been received from the federal government. Step 2, land acquisition is in process. Step 3 is what the public hearing was about, and that's implementing codes and ordinances. It's been in Chris's group, in the long-range planning, community planning group for a long time, as we try to get the plan implemented. And now, as it's starting to hit the ground and actually be part of a permit process, it'll move to current planning, and that's Brett's group. That's why you see both of them here, but in the past, it's just been Chris. The implementing codes and ordinances are what Brett's team will use when people walk into the Building Development Center and say, hey, I've got a project that I'd like to do. How do I get a permit even though I've got gophers or in the impacted area? And that's exactly what we're talking about. So the next step is for the Board of County Commissioners to take the process steps to approve the implementing codes and ordinances. The public hearing was to hear information on that and the perspective of the community. What we heard very clearly in CPED was that there needed to be more communication, clarity on what the costs were. We haven't had the costs nailed down until we were able to actually get the approved plan. The costs that we've written into our plan over the past couple of months that were approved by the federal government are what we've been working to communicate. And Chris and her team have done a great job of outreach, in person, via Zoom, conference calls, partnership with WSU Extension, South County, all the different service areas, thousands of hours of outreach to our community. And we're doing our best to do as much as we can, but we recognize that we're not going to be able to hit everybody all the time. That's why these conversations are so important to us. And what we heard last time from the Board of County Commissioners was to dive a little deeper into a couple of specific cases that can provide the cost to an applicant. And we researched, we tried to find some of the folks that had come in and they were stuck and they couldn't move forward, they couldn't mitigate, they couldn't move around where they wanted to do their project. And so you have 2 example projects in front of you, and that's what this paper is. You can see this yellow one, it's got one on the front and one on the back. But I also want to make sure that you stay connected with this sheet as well. This is essentially the form that we've got that people can use to find out their own costs. And then the backside is a generic example using 5,000 square feet of impact area. What we've done, what we're working on, is to have an automatic calculator that essentially does this, but for folks on the internet, when they get on to thurstonhcp.org, we're still working with IT to make it automatic. It will be automatic if and when the board approves these codes and ordinances and we're able to implement in 2023, January of 2023, we will be able to have that. But I wanted to make sure that we've got this manual and we can run through scenarios automatic. Let's see, I've talked a lot. Any questions so far on what the HCP was, where we are now, and what this conversation is for, implementing codes and ordinances?
Questions?
I think you're doing a good job of explaining it.
Alright, sounds good. So I wanted to, let's do the scenario on the back, on this part first.
Fairview Road.
Yes, Fairview Road, thank you. So when an applicant comes in to the Building Development Center, the way that the Habitat Conservation Plan is written is the first step that we'll try and do with an applicant is avoidance. And we'll say, so you want to do your project in this area, but if you moved it over here, you wouldn't, and it's not in the impacted service area, so it doesn't have the gopher soils, the habitat. If you can move your project and avoid that area, it will cost you $0, no permit. That avoidance does not cost anything, and that's a service that Brett's group is committed to implementing when an applicant walks into the BDC. So that's the first thing to remember, avoidance. It might not cost you anything if you can avoid the impacted habitat. 2 is minimize. If you feel like you can shrink the footprint of your structure, just kind of a quick way to think about this is the area that's going to be graded or that's going to be used in your building project is the area that's impacted, is the area that disturbs the soil, is the area that will potentially kill the gophers and the other species. That's a take. And so what we're gonna help is do the minimize of their footprint. So the less you impact, the less you pay. So first avoidance, second minimize, and then third is mitigate. And that's what leads us to the highlighted area. So this is one that has worked really hard to minimize their footprint. You can see that they've shrunk down the driveway and I think that there's a drain field on this one and the site for the building. So they've done a good job going through all 3 of the steps. They can't avoid, they could not avoid, so they worked to minimize, they shrunk down the footprint, and now we mitigate. And we come to the mitigation process, and that little sticky note on there kind of walks you through this same implementing form. One of the pieces of feedback that we received was you can put the whole cost on there, but when people are in the building mindset, they're thinking price per square foot. And so we added the line of price per square foot to help people better understand what the habitat impact fee is going to look like. And so the price per square foot, if you look at Fairview Road, it's in the service area for Olympia pocket gopher. So the price per square foot on OPG is $1.18 per square foot. On Fairview, on that minimized area, they want to impact about 4,900 square feet. So 4,900 square feet, you take that estimation, given that it's occupied, that we know that gophers are there, it has a 1.6 multiplier. So you take all that information, you put it in the calculator that we're gonna have, and the habitat impact fee for this minimized area in the most expensive OPG area is $9,199. So that's a real world scenario where someone comes in and they work through the process to get their permit. Yes, please.
It seems worth pointing out that you just alluded to it, but OPG is by far the most expensive area. So this might not be actually representative of an average project in Thurston County because you've got one in the most expensive category.
Totally. And we can spend as much time as you want on the different scenarios, but I think that's a very good point. And that leads us back to a conversation that we've had previously. We worked to be more calculated in the service areas to ensure that the costs were representative of the land value of those areas. So OPG is one of the most expensive, but the alternative that we've talked about in the past was one size fits all, which means that South County could be paying more for their permits. The Board of County Commissioners directed us to not do that, to ensure that we went through an economic development study of the land value of all the different service areas that led us to the reduced costs that are relative to the value of the land in the different service areas. So if you go through and you look at the different price per square foot, the Tenino Pocket Gopher price per square foot is 30 cents a square foot. The Yelm Pocket Gopher South is 34 cents. Yelm Pocket Gopher East is 40 cents. Yelm Pocket Gopher North is 47 cents a square foot. And then the Olympia Pocket Gopher area is $1.18. So thank you for pointing that out. I see that the chair has a question.
I do have a question, and I'm wondering how we got to that $9,000 figure if it's $1.18 and it's 4,900 square foot.
So remember to use this, and that's where we're talking about the 1.6, since it's occupied, it has a multiplier of 1.6. So if you
When
go
you say
to,
occupied, Gophers on premise.
yep, it's a known,
It's not just suitable
that's
area
fine.
for gopher, it's
That's-
like there
that's
are
fine.
gophers.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the highest threshold.
and so that's a great question, because we're doing it automatically, but we can run through the form. So if you have the form in front of you, we can do that together. Oh, go ahead, sir.
Before you get to the point, I think you touched on this, on the flat fee. And at some point, the flat fee, the numbers fluctuated between 45,000 per credit in a way. And that even on the flat fee, as you stated, the Board of County Commissioners task staff to look into more this escalated process. So even on the most expensive, the Olympia Pocket Gopher, we have this simple, the flat fee would have been a lot more. And I think just being a little, what I call more surgical, I think is really what the board really requested, because one size fits all doesn't apply. And further, through the process, the board took an action to subsidize some of that impact as well. And the board took an action to take $500,000 from the Conservation Futures Fund to subsidize and in a way ease the burden to individuals that may want to build on their own, that may be affected by the habitat conservation plan. So I think there's a lot of elements that perhaps need to be highlighted. You have done in the past, but this I think is always good to highlight some of the steps the board has taken, because it's not a straight line process.
Definitely.
As it has been for the last few years. It has been a lot of conversation, a lot of input from the board, and really with the objective and intent to ease and minimize the financial impact to the residents of the county.
100%. Thank you for bringing that up, County Manager. There are so many nuances and places where the Board of County Commissioners made decisions to help the applicants. It's hard to go through them all, but that's a big one in terms of using conservation futures dollars to help mitigate some of that cost. These costs could be higher if the board didn't make that decision. So I think that's a big thing, an important thing to highlight. Commissioner Mejia, do you want to walk through the formula? Okay, so let's use this example at 4,900 square feet. So you have this paper in front of you. So you take the 4,900 square feet, and first it's in acres. So this is all the stuff that the automatic calculator is doing for you. So you take the 4,900 divided by 43560. That's how you get that.
That's the square footage of an acre.
43,560 is the square footage of an acre, so you have to make a percentage out of the 4,900. So the 4,900 divided into the size of an acre is 0.112 acres. So then you take that. Doing math on camera is not my favorite thing, so a little bit of grace would be helpful.
So 0.112.
So in that area that says impact area on number 4, see that? That's 0.112.
Okay.
Gosh, I hope this works. Times the habitat value, which is 1.6. Remember, it's occupied. So then you go 0.112 times 1.6 equals 0.179. And then the cost per credit of the OPG is $1.18. times the credits needed, which is 0.179. Did we get close? Did I mess it up somewhere?
You cannot multiply by the cost per square foot if you're
I
using
think there's a
acres.
way easier way to get to the number.
Yeah, we have a calculator.
Well, even without the calculator, even just.
Let me play it out here. I agree with you, Assistant County Manager. 1.18. That doesn't seem right. What did I do wrong, Chris? Should have had you do it.
I think it's the
You're
value of the
multiplying your
OPG.
acres by your square footage, that's why you have to multiply that by 1.
Oh, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, do that for us. Because I already messed it up.
0.179 times 51.
Thank you, not the cents.
Yeah, it's the 15,000,
One,
which is,
1.
because you can.
Yeah, you were gonna
got it.
come up with
Yeah.
about $2.08.
So you gotta convert it into acres?
Did you hear that?
Right, you have to
don't.
remember.
Okay, so I'll jump back in.
Okay.
So I messed up when I did
You converted.
I used the estimated cost per square foot. I needed to use the full 51,000.
Because that's the cost per acre.
So instead of 1.18, it should be 51,111.
I got you.
Got it? I'm gonna try that again. 51,111 times 0.179 equals 9,148.
Yeah, that's easy.
So, there we go. Thank you. Thank
So
you.
they just, for
And
the
there
public's
is a-
perspective, just, you know, you have an impact of 44,900 square feet in this example. You equated the square footage to an acre, so that's 0.17 acres.
After you factored in the occupancy.
Right. So it's 1.7 acres, then you included the occupancy of 1.6.
Right?
And then the 1.6 you multiply by the highest cost of the Olympia Bucket Worker, which is 51,111. And that's how you ended up on the 9,000.
Can you take the same project of 0.179 with that includes occupancy and 49, and just multiply it by the Tenino Pocket Gopher, for example,
Yeah,
it's
that's a
12.
Good one. Yeah.
Before
to
we
get
get
an
Commissioner
example.
McGinn, I know I messed it up. Did you get there with me? Did you come back to us?
I got a different thing on my calculator, but I don't, probably
Maybe I can
in the
go-
mid.
There is a much easier way to get there with the numbers you have in front of you, to not have to convert to an acre. And that is to simply multiply the 4,900 square feet times 1.6 times the $1.18, and you get to this number, roughly this number.
Roughly this number, it's about 20% of an acre, isn't it?
Right,
And if you
so
did it
and
basically.
you don't have to do the know how many feet are in an acre and all the extra steps.
That
It's
might
quite
make it-
straightforward.
Yeah, but that may not be straight line on the other examples.
It works every time.
It works either way. Thank you for your input. We appreciate that. That's why we've had this document available for a couple of weeks. So that being said, let's look through those numbers again, so you've got the right numbers, Commissioner McGee. I really wanna make sure. So the first one, impact area, should be 0.112. Do you have that one?
Yeah.
The next one, habitat value, is 1.6. I understand, Assistant County Manager, I just wanna make sure she's got
Right,
the
right,
numbers.
go your
Equals
way.
0.179. And then cost per credit is the full 51,111.
But you only need a fifth of that credit, based on your impact area.
Right.
Which is 20, yeah, less than
That's
20%.
9,000, and if you did it to
Which is
9,000, it's
9,000.
2,300.
But I think the good question will be if you take that percentage of the 1.117 and apply to the Tenino Pocket Gopher,
2,311.
$2,311.
So that's what we're saying. And it fluctuates, right, depending upon if you use, it's an estimate. And so if you use the price per square foot, if you round up, so what we're doing on this is rounding up. What we're doing on the calculator is using like 20 decimal points. And so it's gonna be roughly $9,100 or 10,000. But it depends, square footage is gonna change. This is just an example. And to Commissioner Vencer's point, depending upon the service area, the Tenino pocket gopher for that same square footage area works out to 2,323, or roughly $2,400. So that is well within the parameters of the discussion that the board had when we talked about the potential fees and costs, that we said it would be around $10,000 for an impacted area of about 5,000 square feet. This is exactly that same outcome. So
It's
that,
gonna be quite a bit cheaper in South County and a
And the
little bit more
difference-
expensive a bit toward
Yep.
Libya. And that's what we directed the scheme to look like.
And I think it may be worth highlighting why the difference between South County and
The
Olympia.
price of land.
It's the cost of the land, and it's the cost of the real estate is obviously more expensive to purchase in the UGA and closer to the cities, the urban areas than purchase in South County. It's just the price of real estate that really drives the cost of.
And are we gonna talk a little bit about the overlap with species? You know, the prairie is covered.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, if you got a frog and the prairie, maybe you have a little overlap. Other than that, you don't have overlap.
yeah, thank you for that, Commissioner.
Okay.
So the other, we've got the gopher species, that's what we talk about a lot, but you've got two other prairie species. You have the Taylor checker spot butterfly and the Oregon vesper sparrow. And so those are prairie species also. They are wrapped into the cost that you see on this paper. So you're not going to be paying an extra cost for those other prairie species. It's not additive. They are included within the cost of the prairie species. If, however, you're going to be impacting a prairie area,
Which is very unusual, I might add.
And a potential wetland where Oregon spotted frog live, those are two different habitats. So if you're grading and impacting a wetland down here and then a hill, you go up a hill to a prairie up here, you're taking off a large swath of land, different habitats, that is additive. You will be paying a prairie impact fee and the wetland Oregon spotted frog impact fee. And the Board of County Commissioners directed us way back to make sure that we were looking to assist single-family residents as our primary beneficiary, and then all others thereafter. And if you're impacting an area that has a big hill, that's wetlands, and this area, you're likely not a single-family resident builder, and we can help to avoid that situation if need be.
But even at that, if you take into consideration on your equation of the Title 24, you're not gonna be up against that frog anyway because of other setback issues that are gonna be in place. So it's not likely to happen. It's just kind of a far out example, if you will. I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but it's not likely to
It's
happen.
a worst case scenario.
Yeah, it's the worst case scenario.
Yeah, I think that's.
No, that, I mean, you might have a submarine launching apparatus on your property, I don't know. But I would like to, I do get a sense that, that this is frustrating, and, I have a little different take on the whole thing. I don't like it. And I think that the county manager said it just about right, though. We're in a box. I don't think any of us like it. We're just faced with the situation that if we don't get a fix, what are citizens to do? Very few are gonna take the Jan Tibetan route and create their own take permit, if you will. Most people are not in that position to be able to do it. So this is an alternative that, I mean, I look at this as extortion by the federal government. I'm gonna take this action as we move forward, under duress, if you will. I mean, I really object to it, but I don't see that we have any other choice if we're gonna allow citizens to move forward. I do see a light at the end of the tunnel, and that light is the United States Supreme Court that has ruled against agencies imposing unrealistic restrictions, whether it's on business or individuals. And I think there is gonna be a fix that comes down the road. It's not gonna be tomorrow, but it's coming down the road sometime in the near future. And, I mean, you've come up with a pretty good avoid, shrink, mitigate. and then move forward under duress, if you will. The option is you can sue the federal government, which most people don't have the deep pockets to do it. And we're kind of under the gun from the federal government. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think we're obligated to do something for the citizens, and this isn't good, but it's better than the alternative.
Commissioner Mentor.
So I agree, I think Commissioner Edwards hit a lot of nails on the head there, and I agree with everything he just said. The question I had, just because I so badly want to get this to the finish line for the benefit of the citizens that can use it, I think it's going to be a lot of people. Are there any stray, I mean, we heard a lot of public comment. I would say 85% of it or 90% of it was just kind of frustration with the fact of having to pay fees, and we've addressed that. I mean, we've tried so hard to get this within reason. But that other 10 or 15%, were there any issues that raised red flags for you guys? I mean, like Stephen Drew had a comment about why aren't we requiring that conservation easements be recorded, because that would help him in his work assessing values and stuff. Is there something there we need to add that we didn't think of, or I don't think that's been talked about? There was a couple other comments like that that were not just frustrated about the whole system, but targeted toward a particular improvement. Anything that, I'm looking at my team, you know, that you guys think that we need to address before we get this to the finish line?
The short answer is no, but we can go through those other inputs as
Great
well.
issues.
Go for it on the assessor one.
So the assessor one, I did respond to the assessor. We do require conservation easements for all of our conservation properties to be recorded. So those will be recorded on the title. In addition, all of the mitigation that will be purchased through the county through the permitting process, we'll be issuing a.
I'm so sorry, can I?
So we have some technical issues. The audio is going through, so the conversation is capturing the live stream. We're trying to fix the video, but I believe the conversation should continue. That is a live stream. But really, it's the image of you having that discussion is not going through. We'll try to fix it.
We're not that good looking.
But still,
We don't have much.
that conversation is being live streamed, so I just want to make you aware of that and the public aware of that technical issues. Go ahead, sorry.
So we relayed to the assessor where it was in the HCP.
Yeah.
His
Okay,
address was
so he's
concerned.
satisfied with your answer on that?
Did not respond back once I provided him the information.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. And was there anything else that you thought was in that category of a stray issue that I can't remember off the top of my head? That was the one I had in my notes.
No, they were mostly focused on A, frustrated with the process in general, that we have to do it at all,
Sure.
and B, on the costs, and nothing other than that in the assessors, which we clarified.
Do you guys remember anything else that was like a, you know, not a frustration about the cost, but a technical, I thought there was at least one.
The overlap issue was.
The overlap issue, maybe that's what it was.
We got.
Oh, I remember what it was. There was a letter from OMB, I wanna say, that said something about, okay, you've got to adaptively manage over time. Can the fees be reduced? Like, if we find that we're taking in too much money, can we then reduce the fee schedule in some way to adaptively manage to, maybe the price of land falls and we don't need, you know, I mean, I know that it's unlikely, but it seemed to me like that was a reasonable question that I sort of wanted to hear you guys respond to.
So there's a requirement in the HCP that we reassess our mitigation fees on an, for the first 5 years, an annual basis, and every 5 years thereafter.
So cost will be reviewed.
So why wasn't that clear to them?
It's a big document.
It's
Okay, it's
huge
just
document.
buried in there and,
I mean, the tabs are pretty clear, but it's big.
okay. I just want to make sure, because I felt like that was going to be the answer, but I wasn't sure.
I do have, I remember and it was from the Northwest Dream Homes, and their comment was in regards to habitat quality and who determines the habitat quality, or how is that determined?
So that has been determined. That's the soil mapping that we have.
Okay,
And that was part of a board decision a couple of years ago, as we were writing the habitat conservation plan.
Okay,
And we worked to, again, that's another one of those places where it could have been one size fits all, but we wanted to try and say, here's more preferred, it's gonna cost you X, here's less preferred, it's gonna cost you less. And that was another one of the spots where the board and the US Fish and the county, we all worked together to try and make sure that was consistent.
so people can go in and look at this map and determine kind of what their habitat
Value.
value is.
Well, what about the occupancy question? I mean, is that set in stone as of now, or do we, at what point, how do we say they're occupied, they're in the occupancy box or they're in the preferred habitat box? I mean, do we go out and inspect, or how does that get, which box do they get and how do they know?
So it is mapped the last 5+ years, because we've been doing this even prior to the federal government listing it under the Endangered Species Act. We have years prior to that, the state had listed this particular species prior to that. So we've got many years of information about where potentially pocket gopher or Taylor checker spot butterfly or any of the covered species are. And we have those areas identified, and you can find them on our map. And we are not going out and doing site inspections. However, we
Because that will
do,
slow people down.
right, it will slow people down. However, we do site inspections on all of our conserved properties. So the map will change, but will only change for those properties for which we own land or is part of our mitigation property. So for the most part, yes,
Just stick with the applicants.
yes, the applicants. Well, it changes for everybody, because they're dispersed listers. But, so the map changes over time,
So we will be doing assessments,
yes.
and we will on the GIS, as people are looking at their property, they'll have that information available to them.
About whether they're in the occupancy category or
Right.
not.
Correct.
Yeah, and it's gold on the map, it's solid or hashtag.
Again, I don't know that I agree with this, but it's the lesser of two evils.
Yeah.
It's very much like early on in the process, it was determined, and this was, I think, back with the federal folks that are really in the driver's seat on this particular issue, that on the north side of I-5, say coming through the county, out of Pierce County, that designation all the way down to Olympia, they said, well, don't worry about that. For whatever reason, they made that determination, same way with the Black River. They made a determination on the Black River, to the west of the Black River, you don't have to worry about that. So it's, and that's not exact science either, it's just the way it is. And so I think what we're talking about here is we're gonna have something similar as we move forward with the mapping situation, I guess. Is it fair to say something like that applies?
So we're trying
Do
to
I have
not,
it kind of right?
it was the solution to not have to do all the site visits.
Yeah.
So we're gonna,
Right.
yep, this is that path.
I mean, we don't have to go north of the freeway, we don't have to go west of the Black River. Well, now we're gonna have these other places where we don't have to go either, but we assume there's a problem. Is that?
Service areas, yep.
I mean, I understand you're trying to, it's a balance, and so if somebody, gophers move from one place to another, if they did, then if somebody comes in and says, we're not fighting, we don't have to engage in those situations of somebody coming in and saying, well, you've got my property in the occupancy, but come look, there's no gophers here. To have a system like that would slow everybody down and would kind of defeat the purpose of having this system, and so it's a trade-off. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah.
I mean, based on best science that we know, like today.
That's fair.
I actually hope I live long enough to see this appealed to the United States Supreme Court, because I feel it's flawed, but I also feel that we're in a box and we have to do what we can do under the existing circumstance to help our citizens as much as we can. So I'll be a witness. Any attorneys out there want a good witness that feels this is extortion, I'm here.
So I just want to clarify
Subpoena me.
what it is flawed. The implementation codes and ordinances we think aren't flawed. I think you're referring to the Endangered Species Act listing?
Yeah, in total and the imposition it puts on the citizen,
Okay.
that's all.
One of the comments I believe the board and staff received is how many pocket golfers that we have? And what will be the number in which we can reach in order to achieve the full recovery of the species? And that continues to be an excellent question. And even early in the process, the county had the same questions to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And how we ended up on the habitat is not unusual as to how an endangered species has been listed. And the way to mitigate is to protect their habitat. And I always draw a parallel to the western gray squirrel. That was listed almost 20 years ago, I believe. And the way to mitigate the impact of the western gray squirrel, which the invasive species was the eastern gray squirrel at that time, it was only to protect their environment. And their environment is the Oregon white oak. And until today, the Oregon white oak is in our books, in everybody's books, is the habitat to protect the western gray squirrel. So the protecting the habitat of listed species is not unusual how the federal government has gone through this process. And this is what we're dealing with at this point, is protecting the environment for the listed species of the pocket gopher and the other two that we include in the HCP. Through this process, commissioners, and I can really relate to you and the frustrations that you have gone through this process. Previous boards, the current board, and the difficulty that you face in making those difficult decisions. And I think Commissioner Edwards has stated, Mr. Tibet, I believe he is probably the right example as to why this is in front of you. Mr. Tibetan wanted to build a couple of homes in his property for his family, his kids. It was actually listed pocket gopher habitat. The process that we had in place as of last year is to avoid to wait until the HCP or any citizen can go to secure their own HCP. He took that route twice. It took him close to 2.5 years to go through one process. The result of that, it was not about just the time and effort that he spent on the 2.5 years and hiring a consultant to help them go through and prepare their own HCP. And also the cost that he needed to reserve his property as a perpetual easement. So it's not about the cost, the time and the effort that he went through, and also in his property is a conservation easement that he had to go, there is a value to that as well. So in this is a straight line process. Nobody likes it. Nobody likes it from the legislative authority to the staff level. Nobody likes it from the beginning. Even from the beginning when those walls were building and creating this box. Going against the federal government is a losing strategy. Going against a listed species is a losing strategy. And we have seen many listed species in this region, Western Washington, perhaps on the West Coast. And the spotted owl was another species that was listed. And that one by itself is protecting their environment, which is forest. As a result of their many lawsuits associated with challenging that, nothing was successful, as far as I'm concerned.
I want to take exception to that because there were successful court challenges that mitigated down the property to be set aside.
Reducing, but
Yes.
the listed species
That's right.
itself was not.
You're right.
So the listing was not even a question. It was about reducing the habitat, right?
That's right.
Right. So it comes to this point of I believe, I will say the obligation the Board of County Commissioners have to respond to difficult situations. And this is one of them. And the intent is to help the residents of Thurston County to move forward and doing what I perceive they have the right to do so on their own properties. So really this is a challenging issue, has been a challenge, not just for the legislative authority, for staff for the last few years, but for the residents of the county. So
Thank you for that, County Manager. And so when staff is thinking about fulfilling the direction of the Board of County Commissioners, this is that, the implementing codes and ordinances to address the folks that are stuck, the people that haven't been able to build on their properties because they're occupied. We've helped hundreds of people over the past 5 years use the interim gopher review process. But in our minds, we have the 54 folks that can't do anything until the implementing codes and ordinances are passed. And we call them back and we say, the board has passed it, you can now purchase a habitat impact fee, let's proceed with your project. That's 54 that we know of. We don't know who doesn't even come and talk to us because they know that they're stuck. So when we're thinking about, the big picture ESA and nobody likes it and we got to put it in a box, all that I think is really important. But what Brett and Chris and I are thinking about are those 54 residents of Thurston County that we had to say no to because we didn't have the habitat conservation program in place. And getting direction from the board to submit an AIS to have the implementing codes and ordinances passed is the next most important step to serving those 54 applicants and the ones that we don't know about.
And I just want to follow up on what Josh said. We did say no, but we did give them an option. No, but you can go do what Jan Tibetan did. And that is unfortunate because most citizens are not going to be able to do that.
Thank you. And Commissioner, the reality is they still have that option.
Yes.
If they don't want to use our calculator or our habitat impact fee program, they can try and go work with the federal government. The Board of County Commissioners, I believe, has provided direction for us to serve those applicants in a way that they don't have to try and do what Jan Tibetan did. So I appreciate your support.
And that is a good point, because if the board approves this codes and ordinances that which implements the fee structure as you presented, those citizens who don't like this process, they do have the option to go with their own HCP.
Yep, yes.
And they can also file litigation against the government.
Yep.
And I hope somebody does that, because I think there'll be a change, but it isn't going to happen overnight. That's why I
Against
say
the federal government, right?
I hope I live long enough to see that happen. Chances are probably not good that that's going to happen, but we'll see.
Okay, so, I mean, for me, I feel the same way. I don't wanna keep beating the same old horse with the same stick, I feel the same way that my seatmates do. I think the county manager puts it best, we're put in a box and we're trying to make the best situation of what we got. So with that, is there?
With your concurrence, we will bring an AIS for you to consider taking a formal action on what is presented to you an upcoming board meeting.
Sorry, say that again. Apologize.
With your concurrence, we'll bring an AIS for the board to consider approving the codes and ordinances in an upcoming board meeting.
Okay.
So
It is-
just for the viewing public, since there is not a video, we have 3 commissioners concurring on bringing an AIS.
Under duress, I might add.
An AIS for you to take a formal action in an upcoming board meeting.
Yeah, and so thank you, Josh, and thank you staff for coming here and for giving us this live examples. I think those are good, and for walking us through the formula. Apologize to the public, we have some technical issues going on, so that's why our video cut off. So it is 11:19, we are adjourned.